this thing that I said in the beginning of my talk. This is what I think Allah and the interpreters of what Allah had to say meant when He said that we are supposed to read the two. He gave us two Quran. We're supposed to read them in a balance. One is really the spiritual side in the book given to the beloved Prophet Muhammad. The other one is like the objective look at His creation that we are supposed to look, not just look at, but come to know with deep intimacy. And when we put those two together, that this is where the fullness of our religion is. That our religion is not just a spiritual religion, and it is certainly not just an objective fact religion. It is one to know in its fullness the creation and the nature of Allah's creation. And once you really know it, you then have a spiritual, you make a spiritual advance. And yes, of course, the things that I have been saying, many of these things I have been saying have been said in much less direct ways by various Sufi scholars for 1,000 years or more. Although it's hard to understand what they say because they usually write it in poetry or in a symbolic way. I tried to say it in the most objective way I can with the limitations of our language. And these limitations of our language are really huge. I mean, you know, you see me over time and again not being able to say something because words and concepts, our words and concepts are space-time and matter-based. And I want to talk about something now that is outside of space-time and matter. And the words and the concepts are really hard to come by. But in the future, if we have scholars looking in that area, we will develop words and concepts to be able to discuss and think about those things.
How are
yes?
we going to actually, once realizing this foreignty of existence, how are we going to say to a person living on this earth, how are you going to live life? You know what I mean? Now you know that you are subatomic particles and things like that, and you move backward. What are you supposed to do? And how can you avoid taking the Hindu position of that this life is just an illusion and that's it? Because that's where the boundary comes in. If we are not careful to take the other position, then we end up not doing anything.
Well, I mean, to answer that would take another whole talk, which I need to give sometime, which is about what really the Khalifa experience is. But Allah has been very direct to us, and the scholars have been really direct about what it is we are supposed to do as Khalifa of Allah. Not only are we supposed to make ourselves good, help others become good, and help the physical world become good, but we are supposed to alter the way that we think. We are supposed to look very carefully at the way that we think and contemplate the way that we think and contemplate the things that we see and that we perceive. And we are supposed to contemplate them on the basis of how they relate to Allah and Allah's creation. And by doing so, we start to shape ourselves into beings who cannot see the world anymore from the standard material position where what seems to matter in the world today cannot matter once you have altered your thought processes in the way that Allah has told us to do. And part of it is really about the Khalifa plan, which is to that every good influence that comes in from any of the three sources, right, the physical, the social, or our own inner speech, anything good that comes in is from Allah. And we are supposed to use our inner speech as Khalifa of Allah to increase the power of that in our consciousness. And when we increase the power of that, that becomes who we are. But also, Shaitan is using these three same sources: the physical, the social, and the inner speech. And part of our responsibility as Khalifa of Allah is to recognize which of these influences comes in from Shaitan. And Allah has told us that we can, just as I've said in psychology, we cannot actually get rid of them. But we can overwrite them, and we can isolate them in our consciousness so that they do not become part of how we think, and how we think determines how we act. And this is really what we are supposed to be doing. We are supposed to constantly becoming closer to Allah and further toward carrying out His will by contemplating His creation, right? But contemplating His creation really means deeply thinking about it. Contemplating Allah's creation is not simply saying, oh, Allah created the material existence. Contemplating His creation is, for example, knowing that Allah can take two photons and have them collide in a certain way as to produce a proton and two others to produce an electron, and how He puts them together and how He tells them to have this exact relationship with each other. By having this exact relationship, they carry out one of the roles that is necessary for the fulfillment of His plan. That this kind of deep level of contemplation is really necessary to get close to Allah.
How are they going? Because when he moves into this contemplative mode, say in his life, how is he going to balance his so-called material work or material pursuit vis-a-vis the total pursuit of as a God? How is he going to balance that?
Yeah, well, the balance eventually becomes, no matter what you are doing, you have this contemplation going on. You go into a business deal to sign a contract. I mean, I'm not saying this is exactly how it is. I'm just giving a hypothetical example. So you take the pen to sign this, and as you are taking the pen, automatically, right now, you have reached a level of contemplation where everything you do now is in relationship to contemplation of the creation of Allah. So the pen and the paper and your relationship with this other person and the deal you are trying to make, all of these things have an exquisite place and fit just right in the scheme of things for Allah. And if they don't, you shouldn't be participating in them. And even while you are like doing a business deal, you are remembering on a number of levels, you know, that Allah made the stuff to make the pen. That the stuff that makes the pen is directed by light. That the words on the paper were decided by somebody, not just out of their head, but by light that came in from outside of space and time. And this is, you know, I mean, we are early in this. How you really do it, how it will eventually be done, I'm not really sure, other than to say it will be done eventually on an unconscious level, so that everything that we participate in, everything that we think about, everything that we do is done in a direct relationship with Allah and remembrance of Allah and contemplation of His creation. Absolutely everything. And then many of the things that we are doing now are going to not exist in the future. I mean, you know, much of what goes on in the world today is not for Allah. It is for other kinds of purposes. And ultimately, we need to be working toward a world where everything that Allah says is right comes to exist. Everything that Allah says is wrong ceases to exist. This is what we need to be working toward. My policy is really never to say much about the jinn. And I say very little about the jinn because scholarly opinion is we know very little about the jinn. I know much more about angels than I know about jinn, and I know a whole lot more about the material existence that we're in than I know about the jinn. But it appears that